In 1572, Tupac Amaru, the last emperor of the indigenous Incan people, was executed by the Spanish as decreed by Francisco de Toledo, the viceroyalty of Peru. He was ardently opposed to Christianity and the colonial occupation of his land and championed the preservation of indigeneity. In one fell swoop, the entire world of the Incan people, life as they knew it, was changed forever. The execution of Tupac Amaru was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, cementing Spain's imperialistic chokehold on the New World. This important event was well documented in the history books, but the visual representations differ slightly, and the difference speaks volumes to the politics of the time. There are two popular documents that chronicle Peru at the time, including illustrations of the execution of Tupac Amaru. The first was Historia General del Perú, written by the Mercedarian friar Martín de Murúa. The second was El Primer Nueva Crónica y Buen Gobierno, written by the indigenous Peruvian Felipe Huamampoma de Ayala. When the two works are compared side by side, at first take they seem almost identical. But art and history are both very subjective, and the subject position, the identity of these two artists in the political world, shows itself in the subtle yet significant difference in the two artist versions of the death of Tupac Amaru. Murúa, who is Spanish and a friar in the church, which was arguably the main institution behind Spanish colonization of the New World, writes from a place that conforms to the hegemonic European narrative. Huamampoma, who was an activist for Andean causes, offers an indigenous Andean perspective, one that comes with personal knowledge of society that could not be replicated by European chroniclers. In both scenes, we see the final moments of the Incan ruler Tupac Amaru, in the moment just before or right after his beheading, as a crowd of indigenous folk looks on, crying and shouting their sorrow. In Huamampoma's version of the beheading, Tupac Amaru is shown in the traditional indigenous dress, headdress and all. The onlookers are also unique in their looks, their indigeneity made obvious by the ornamentation on their ears. Interestingly, Tupac Amaru is shown holding a Christian cross in his hands. Historical reports say that in the days leading up to his death, he was tortured and forced to be baptized and convert to Christianity. Perhaps Huamampoma included the juxtaposition of the cross and the indigenous dress to show that even though, in the end, Tupac Amaru converted to the religion he detested, and the Spanish murdered him anyways for who he was and what he represented, an indigenous person rebelling against imperialism. In Murúa's version of the beheading, all indications of indigeneity are erased from both Tupac Amaru and the Incan onlookers. The clothing is completely nondescript beyond color variation, and there is no ornamentation, and everyone's hair is the same. Europeanizing Indian features was not a new concept, one that was used often at the time by European artists such as Theodore de Bry to dehumanize indigenous bodies and thus normalize any violence against them. Also absent from Murúa's version is the cross in Tupac Amaru's hands. If Murúa's aim with the illustration were to legitimize the execution, including the cross would not have done that. By leaving out the cross, it leaves out an important part of historical fact that Tupac Amaru did convert to Christianity in the days before his death, and that fact gives credence to the belief that his death was wrong. The difference between the illustrations by Huamampoma and Murúa are not coincidental. They are in fact very calculated and intentional in what visual imagery is included and what is left out. When looking at art, especially artwork of a very tumultuous political era, it is important to keep in mind who created the artwork. All we have left of the past are the stories left behind, and every story has more than one side. The history that we learn today is the history written by the winners. What I ask of you is, whose history are you listening to?